She wanted the spotlight at any cost. So I arrived with her, Brian, took the stage, and left her alone with the lights off. But this story doesn't start with triumph. It starts with a blurry photo on my phone, taken at 2:37 a.m. on a Friday in June, 3 weeks before my wedding. A photo that would make my world stop spinning and then spin in the opposite direction, so fast I could barely breathe. The image showed Tessa, my cousin, my supposed childhood best friend, the woman I had chosen as my maid of honor, leaning against Brian outside the hall where we had just rehearsed the ceremony. Her hands were on his chest, her face was tilted upwards, lips slightly parted, eyes narrowed in that expression she used in all her seductive Instagram selfies. And Brian? Brian was frozen, hands raised as if trying to create distance, a look of pure shock plastered across his flashlit face. Kennedy had taken the photo. My photographer friend, who was documenting the wedding preparations, had stepped out to grab more equipment from the car when she saw. She didn't hesitate. Click. Documented. And then sent it to me with a 3-word message. You need to know. The scent of lavender from my aroma diffuser filled my room as I stared at that image, reading and rereading it as if repetition could change what I was seeing. Lavender, supposedly calming, supposedly relaxing. At that moment, it only made me feel nauseous. My phone vibrated. Brian. Honey, are you still awake? I need to talk to you. Something happened at the rehearsal after you left. It's about Tessa. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to reply immediately, confront him, demand explanations. But another part, the part that had grown up watching Tessa manipulate every situation, twist every narrative to her advantage, knew I needed to be strategic. I'm awake. Come over. He arrived 15 minutes later, still wearing the navy blue shirt from the rehearsal, hair messy as it got when he ran his hands through it repeatedly, his nervous habit. Before he could speak, I showed him the photo. Kennedy sent me this. Brian looked at the image and his face paled, not with the guilt of someone caught doing something wrong, but with the anger of someone victimized by something they didn't ask for. I was going to tell you, right now, that's why I came. He sat on the edge of my bed, head in his hands. Hazel, I swear to God, I didn't do anything. I was in the parking lot checking if I'd left my wallet in the car when she showed up, started talking about how happy she was for us, how we were perfect together. Then, out of nowhere, she threw herself at me, tried to kiss me, told her she was crazy, and that's when I saw the flash. Kennedy was there, thank God, because without a witness, Tessa would say you harassed her. I finished the sentence, my voice surprisingly calm. Because I knew my cousin. I knew her pattern. I knew how she operated. Exactly. Bryant looked at me, his brown eyes carrying the weight of something more than just that incident. But Hazel, there's more. Things that have happened in the past few months that I didn't tell you, because I thought I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. He told me everything. How Tessa had started casually showing up at places where he was, the gym, the grocery store, even the fire station where he worked, always with elaborate excuses. How she would send late-night messages, checking in to see if he was treating me well, but always with a subtext that made his stomach churn. How she would post old photos of the 3 of us, her, me, and Brian, but always edited so that I was blurred in the background while she and Brian were in sharp focus in the center. Why didn't you tell me? My voice trembled. Because I knew it would hurt you. Because she's your family. Because, he paused, running his hand through his hair again. Because part of me was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you would choose her. His words cut deep because they contained a truth I didn't want to admit. How many times had I defended Tessa? How many times had I rationalized her selfish behavior as she just wants attention, her destructive jealousy as she's going through a tough time, her calculated lies as she exaggerates sometimes? Tessa wasn't just my cousin. She was the daughter my Aunt Vivian had had 6 months before my mother had me. We grew up like sisters, sharing cribs, toys, secrets. But somewhere along the way, our relationship had become toxic, competitive. as if life were a zero-sum game where her happiness depended on my unhappiness. And I had allowed it, for years, because family was family, because it was easier to give in than to confront, because on some deep, sick level, I had been conditioned to believe that Tessa's feelings mattered more than mine. "I believe you," I said finally, "and I need you to know this isn't about you and Tessa. This is about me and Tessa, about a pattern that has existed for 28 years and that I am finally seeing for what it is." Brian pulled me into a hug, and I breathed in the familiar scent of smoke and soap that always accompanied him. But even in his arms, my mind was already working, processing, planning, because there was something Brian didn't know, something no one knew, except me and Kennedy. 3 months ago, Tessa had asked me to be her maid of honor in a future wedding, a wedding with a man named Brian, whom she claimed to be secretly dating. She showed me photos, messages, elaborate stories about how they met, how he asked her out, how he was planning to propose soon. I had believed it. Of course I had. Why would I doubt it? But then Kennedy, ever skeptical, ever investigative, had reverse engineered the photos, discovered they were from stock photo models' social media profiles. The messages, probably written by Tessa herself on a fake messaging app. Tessa's Brian never existed. It was fantasy, projection. And when I got engaged to my Brian, my real, tangible Brian, who loved and respected me, something in her broke. Or perhaps it just revealed what had always been there, hidden beneath layers of performance and manipulation. She didn't want Brian specifically. She wanted what I had. She always wanted what I had. "What are we going to do?" Brian asked, his voice muffled against my hair. I looked at the lavender diffuser, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. Lavender, the plant my grandmother Dorothy always said represented devotion and purity, but also caution, distrust. "We're getting married," I said, exactly as planned, with Tessa as maid of honor, with the whole family watching. And then I paused, feeling something new solidifying inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but clarity, purpose. Then we're going to give her exactly what she always wanted, the spotlight, all the attention, and we're going to let the light reveal who she truly is. Brian pulled away, looking at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Hazel, what are you planning?" "Justice," I said simply. "Not revenge, justice, and liberation. For me, for you, and for every person Tessa has manipulated and hurt over the years." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, the scent of lavender keeping me company, as years of memories rearranged themselves in my mind like puzzle pieces finally finding their correct places. The high school boyfriend who mysteriously broke up with me after talking with Tessa, the scholarship I lost after Tessa accidentally sent a compromising email from my account, the dream job that slipped through my fingers when Tessa gave an honest but concerned reference to the recruiter. Every sabotage, every betrayal, every moment where she shone while I withered. And through it all, I had smiled, forgiven, rationalized, because that's what good girls did. That's what family did. But good girls didn't have to be doormats, and family wasn't a license for abuse. The lavender diffuser finally ran out of water at 5:47 a.m., the steam ceasing, leaving only silence and crystalline clarity. In 3 weeks, I would get married. In 3 weeks, Tessa would stand at the altar beside me, smiling for the cameras, posting selfies, soaking up attention as she always did. And in 3 weeks, everything would change. Because I had Kennedy, I had evidence, I had years of testimonies from people Tessa had hurt but who were too afraid to speak up. And most importantly, I had something Tessa never had, people who truly loved me, not for the performance, but for the person. Brian, my mother Iris, my grandmother Dorothy, Kennedy. They were my real family, my foundation. And together, we were going to make sure the spotlights Tessa so desperately wanted finally illuminated the truth. All of it. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Kennedy. "I need you to document everything, every interaction, every moment, until the wedding. Are you in? Her reply came immediately. Always have been. Let's expose this narcissist. I smiled for the first time in hours. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of someone who had finally stopped running and decided to fight. The scent of lavender still lingered in the air, fainter now, but present. Devotion, purity, caution, and justice. 3 weeks. The clock was ticking, and Tessa had no idea what was coming. The next morning arrived with a thick fog over Seattle, the kind that made the city seem shrouded in a secret. Appropriate. I had a meeting with my mother and grandmother to finalize wedding details, flowers, music, seating arrangements, things that should have been joyful, but now carried the weight of knowledge I couldn't share. Not yet. I met them at Grandma Dorothy's favorite cafe, a small place on Capitol Hill that smelled of cinnamon and old promises. My grandmother was sitting by the window, white hair perfectly coiffed, blue eyes as sharp as ever. She had that quality of seeing through people, of reading between the lines that others ignored. My mother, Iris, was beside her, softer around the edges, but no less perceptive. She knew me better than anyone. One look at my face, and she knew. "What happened?" she asked, before I even sat down. I took a deep breath. Tessa tried to seduce Brian yesterday, at the rehearsal. The silence that followed was as thick as the fog outside. Then my grandmother did something unexpected. She laughed, not with humor, but with bitter recognition. "Finally," she said, her voice carrying decades of pent-up frustration. "Mom," my mother began, but Grandma Dorothy raised her hand. "No, Iris. Enough. Enough protecting Vivian, enough protecting Tessa, enough pretending this family doesn't have rot at its core." She turned to me, eyes shining with something that looked like tears and anger in equal measure. "Hazel, dear, there are things you need to know. Things about Tessa, about Vivian, about why this girl became what she is." And then my grandmother told a story that recontextualized everything. 29 years ago, Vivian and Iris were pregnant at the same time, sisters, best friends, sharing the journey of motherhood. But Vivian had always been competitive, always needed to be first, best, most special. When Vivian had Tessa 6 months before my mother had me, she treated it as a victory. Her daughter was born first. Her daughter would be older, wiser, a natural leader. But then something changed. Vivian's husband, Tessa's father, started working more, being homeless. Vivian, consumed by insecurities, began to use Tessa as validation. Every developmental milestone was posted, exaggerated, competed against other children. And when I was born, and my mother raised me with quiet love instead of public performance, Vivian became resentful. Because I was happy, genuinely happy, without needing constant external validation. Vivian taught Tessa that love was conditional, my grandmother said, her voice heavy. That attention was currency. That worth was measured in likes, glances, others' envy. And when Tessa couldn't get attention authentically, Vivian taught her to steal it, to manipulate, to do anything necessary to be center stage. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Because I hoped Vivian would change, that Tessa would grow up and get over it, that love could mend what competition had broken. Grandma Dorothy held my hand, but some people don't want to be mended. They want the world to bow to them. And Tessa became exactly what Vivian raised her to be, a performative narcissist who knows no real love, only transaction. My mother was crying silently. "I should have protected you better, should have set boundaries with Vivian years ago. But she's my sister, and You chose peace over truth," I finished gently. "I understand. I did the same for years." "But no more?" my grandmother asked, studying my face. "No more." I told them about the plan, about Kennedy documenting everything, about exposing Tessa at the wedding, not with drama, but with truth, with evidence, with years of patterns finally brought to light. My mother looked worried. Hazel, this is going to blow up the family. Vivian will never forgive you. Vivian never truly loved me to begin with, I said, and it was liberating to admit. She tolerated me as long as I didn't threaten Tessa's narrative as superior. But the moment my happiness overshadowed Tessa's performance, I became an enemy. My grandmother squeezed my hand. Then do it. Expose her. But Hazel, she paused, her eyes meeting mine. Do it for the right reason, not for revenge, for liberation. For all the future girls Tessa could manipulate, for breaking a cycle that has poisoned this family for too long. That's exactly why I'm doing it, I promised. We spent the rest of the morning finalizing wedding details, but now every decision carried double weight. The flowers, lavender and white roses, symbolizing truth and new beginnings. The music, not just romantic, but about overcoming. The seating arrangements, strategically planned so that key witnesses were perfectly positioned. When I left the cafe, the fog had dissipated, revealing a clear blue sky. Symbolic. My phone vibrated. A message from Tessa. Hi, cousin. Can we meet today? I need to talk about the maid of honor dress. I want to make sure I look perfect on your special day. I read the message 3 times, looking for subtext. Your special day. But she wanted to make sure she looked perfect. Not me. Her. Always about her. I replied, sure, coffee at 3. Her reply was instant. Perfect. Can't wait. 3 hours later, I was sitting at Starbucks in Fremont watching Tessa walk in. She was dressed as if for a photo shoot. Designer jeans, silk blouse, impeccable makeup. Heads turned. She smiled, soaking up attention like oxygen. Hazel, she hugged me too tightly, expensive perfume suffocating. You look tired, sweetie. Pre-wedding stress? Not, are you okay, or how can I help? Just a critical observation disguised as concern. Just a lot of organizing, I said lightly. Well, I'm here to help. After all, I'm your maid of honor. She pulled out her phone, showing photos. So, I was thinking, how about this one? It's Vera Wang. A bit pricey, but for your wedding, it's worth it. The dress was stunning. It was also white. Tessa, that dress is white. It's ivory, she corrected. Totally different. And look how elegant it is. We don't want your maid of honor to look out of place in the photos, do we? She wanted to wear white to my wedding. She wanted to compete, even in that. How about this one? I showed her a photo of a navy blue dress I had selected. I think it matches the theme better. Her face fell for a split second before the mask returned. Navy blue? Hazel, that's going to make me look washed out. And you want your photos to be beautiful, right? I want my photos to be about me and Brian, not about my maid of honor outshining the bride. Tense silence. Then she laughed, but it sounded forced. You're being sensitive. Pre-wedding stress. I totally get it. Gaslighting. Classic. Tessa, I need to ask you something. Why did you try to kiss Brian yesterday? Her face paled. For a moment, I saw pure panic. Then she composed herself, tears instantly welling up. I didn't. Hazel, I was drunk. I barely remember. If I did something inappropriate, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean anything. You weren't drunk. Kennedy was there. She saw everything and photographed it. The tears dried instantly. Something cold and calculating replaced the performance of remorse. So that's it? Kennedy always hated me, always tried to drive a wedge between us, and now she's planting lies in your head. They're not lies, and it's not just Kennedy. Brian told me about the messages, the casual appearances, the edited posts, everything. Tessa stood up abruptly. You know what's funny? I always knew you were insecure, but I didn't think you'd be so paranoid as to accuse your own cousin, your best friend, of what exactly? Trying to steal your mediocre fiancé? Mediocre. There it was, the real contempt seeping through the cracks. Sit down, Tessa. No, I'm not going to sit here being accused of. Sit down. My voice was firmer than it had ever been with her. Because I'm going to give you a choice. You can drop out of the wedding now, graciously, claim a scheduling conflict, and we'll never speak of this again. Or what? Or you stay as maid of honor, come to the wedding, smile for the cameras, and accept the consequences of what happens next. She studied me, trying to read my expression. What are you planning? Justice, I said simply. You choose if you want to be present when it arrives. Tessa sat down slowly. When she spoke, her voice was different, lower, more real. Do you really hate me that much? The question caught me off guard because the answer was complex. No, Tessa, I don't hate you. In fact, part of me pities you because you never learned that love isn't a competition, that attention isn't the same as connection, that being seen isn't the same as being loved. I paused, but pity doesn't mean I'm going to keep letting you hurt me or hurt the people I love. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes, real vulnerability, real pain, the girl who grew up believing that worth was measured in applause and envy. Then she blinked, and the mask returned. I'm going to the wedding, she said. I'm going to be the best maid of honor you've ever seen. I'm going to smile, I'm going to pose, and I'm going to prove you wrong about me. Okay, I said calmly, because her presence was exactly what I needed. She left without looking back, leaving her coffee untouched on the table. Another cold, abandoned drink. I sat there for another 20 minutes, processing. My phone vibrated. Kennedy. How did it go? She's going to be there. She chose the spotlight. Then we'll make sure they illuminate everything. Every lie. I smiled, but there was no joy in it, only determination. In 2 weeks and 4 days, I would get married, and Tessa would find out that not all spotlights are gentle. Some reveal, some expose, some burn, and she had chosen to stand under them. The next 2 weeks were a careful dance between wedding preparations and gathering evidence. Kennedy became my silent shadow, documenting every interaction with Tessa, every moment where the mask slipped, and there were many. At the bridal shower, Tessa arrived 2 hours late, stealing a dramatic entrance that should have been mine. She wore a vibrant red dress while everyone else followed the pastel color code we had agreed upon. When my Aunt Vivian commented on how stunning she looked, Tessa replied, "Well, someone has to bring life to this party," as if my party was dull without her. Kennedy captured everything. The look of disdain when I opened presents, the dramatic sigh when guests congratulated me, the way she redirected every conversation to herself. This reminds me of when I always said that, at my future wedding. But it was during the rehearsal dinner, a week before the wedding, that the first real crack appeared. We were at the family's favorite Italian restaurant, Cafe Lago, with its exposed brick walls and aroma of roasted garlic permeating the air. 20 people, close family and intimate friends, gathered to celebrate. Brian was by my side, his hand finding mine under the table whenever Tessa spoke, a silent anchor reminding me I wasn't alone in this. My grandmother Dorothy was sitting at the head of the table, observing everything with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Beside her, my mother, Iris, chatted with her sister Vivian, though the tension between them was palpable to anyone who knew their history. Vivian was a harsher version of my mother. Same green eyes, same brown hair, but where my mother had softness, Vivian had edges. She looked at Tessa with a mixture of pride and something darker, possessiveness, perhaps, or fear that her creation was finally being exposed. A toast! Tessa abruptly stood up, wine glass in hand, a perfectly calibrated smile. No one had asked for a toast from her. That was Brian's father's job. But Tessa never waited for permission to take the stage. "To my cousin Hazel," she began, her voice carrying that performative quality she knew she was being watched. "We grew up together. We shared everything, secrets, dreams, and now she's about to start a new chapter." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "I just hope Brian knows how lucky he is. Hazel is special. The quiet type. The type that goes unnoticed until someone really pays attention. The words were technically a compliment, but the subtext was poison. Quiet type? Goes unnoticed? As if I were bland, invisible, needing someone to notice me to have worth. And Brian, she continued, turning to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, you're a lucky man. Taking care of Hazel, well, that requires special patience, but I'm sure you're up for it. Special patience, as if I were a burden, a project, something that required heroic tolerance. Brian squeezed my hand tighter. I felt his body tense beside me, his jaw clenching the way it did when he was controlling anger. Actually, Kennedy stood up, interrupting before Tessa could continue. I'd like to make a toast too. She raised her glass of water. Kennedy never drank at events, always keeping her mind clear for photography. To Hazel, the most genuine woman I know, who doesn't need spotlights to shine, who doesn't need to diminish others to feel great, and who has the courage to love without fear, even when people around her turn love into competition. The silence that followed was dense. Tessa had sat down, face red, smile frozen into something that looked more like a grimace. Vivian looked at Kennedy with ill-disguised hostility. But my grandmother Dorothy, she was smiling, small but genuine. Here, here, she said softly, raising her own glass, and one by one, others joined. Not everyone, Vivian notably kept her glass on the table, but enough. The dinner continued with tension vibrating beneath the surface of polite conversations. Tessa was quiet now, fiddling with her pasta, answering questions in monosyllables. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then it happened. I had gone to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe, to process, to remind myself why I was doing this. When I returned, I heard voices coming from the small patio at the back of the restaurant. I recognized them immediately, Tessa and Vivian. I stopped before turning the corner, hidden by the shadows. Kennedy appeared beside me silently, camera already in hand, lens pointed at the patio, through the window. You're ruining everything. Vivian's voice was low but intense. I told you to be subtle, to make Hazel seem less without making you seem obvious. I am being subtle, Tessa retorted. It's not my fault if that bitch Kennedy decided to call me out in front of everyone. Kennedy isn't the problem. The problem is you can't control your need for attention for 5 minutes. Vivian grabbed Tessa's shoulders, forcing her to look at her. Listen, after the wedding, after the photos are posted, after everyone sees how beautiful and perfect you are as maid of honor, then you smile, you support, you make everyone believe you're the loving sister I always pretended we were. What if I don't want to? Tessa pulled free. What if I'm tired of pretending Hazel is special when she's just mediocre? What if I'm tired of watching her have everything? A family that truly cares, a man who truly loves her, a life that doesn't require constant performance. Vivian became very quiet. When she spoke, her voice was laden with something that sounded like ancient pain. You think I don't know what that's like? You think I haven't spent my whole life competing with Iris? Watching her be the favorite daughter, the perfect mother, the sister everyone admired? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. But I learned, Tessa. I learned that if you can't be loved genuinely, you become indispensable. You become the one everyone needs to impress. And you do that by being better, more beautiful, more successful, more everything. But it's not working, Mom, Tessa's voice broke. No matter how many followers I have, no matter how many perfect photos I post, no matter how many times I get attention, it's never enough. I still feel empty. For a moment, I saw real humanity in Tessa, real vulnerability. The girl broken beneath the performance. Then, Vivian said something that changed everything. Empty is better than invisible. Trust me. I'd rather be envied and alone than loved and forgotten. She paused. And if you can't have Brian, if you can't ruin her wedding, then you make sure everyone remembers you that day. Not her. You. How? Vivian smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile. Leave it to me. I have a plan. They went back inside before we could hear more. Kennedy and I looked at each other, both processing what we had just witnessed. Did you get everything? I asked. Every word, video and audio. Kennedy paused. Hazel, this is more than Tessa being jealous. This is Vivian actively planning to sabotage your wedding. I know. My voice was surprisingly calm, because finally, I had irrefutable evidence, not just of Tessa's behavior, but of where it came from the mother who molded her into a weapon, who taught her that love was competition and worth was measured in others' envy. What do we do? Nothing, yet. I walked back to the dining room, Kennedy behind me. We let them think we don't know. We let them execute their plan, and then I paused, something solidifying inside me. Then we make sure the spotlights they crave so much illuminate everything, not just Tessa's behavior, but decades of toxicity that Vivian perpetuated. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. Tessa was animated again, smiling, posing for photos, a perfect performance of a loving maid of honor. Vivian watched with satisfaction, believing she had fixed the situation. They had no idea that every word, every plan, every moment of manipulation was being documented. When the night ended, Brian drove me home. Neither of us spoke during the ride. What was there to say? We were beyond words, in the territory of action. Are you sure about this? He asked, finally, when we stopped in front of my apartment. Once you expose this, there's no going back. Your family. She's not my family, I interrupted gently. Vivian and Tessa, they're blood. But family is who loves you without needing to diminish you, who celebrates your happiness without feeling threatened. And those people, they were never family. They were an audience for a performance I didn't even know I was staging. Brian pulled me into a hug, and I breathed in the scent of smoke and soap, letting him anchor me. 6 days, he murmured against my hair. In 6 days, you'll be my wife, and nothing Tessa or Vivian do can change that. 6 days, I agreed, but my mind was already racing ahead, planning, preparing. Because Vivian had a plan, and now so did I. The difference was that mine was built on truth, and truth, however painful, always wins over performance. Always. That night, the scent of lavender filled my room again. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was comforting. A reminder that even amidst toxicity, beauty and truth still existed. And in 6 days, both would take the stage. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments if you have experienced anything similar. The next 5 days were a whirlwind of final preparations and rising tension. Kennedy had compiled all the documented material into a meticulous timeline: videos, audios, screenshots, testimonies. It wasn't just about Tessa trying to seduce Brian. It was about a decades-long pattern: sabotages, manipulations, lies built so carefully that they became accepted truth in the family narrative. But it was 2 days before the wedding that the second revelation dropped like a bomb. I was at my grandmother Dorothy's apartment, helping her choose an outfit for the ceremony, when she led me to her office, a small room full of old books and yellowed photographs that smelled of old paper and preserved memories. "There's something I need to show you," she said, pulling a dusty shoebox from the back of the closet. "Something I've kept for 30 years, waiting for the right moment. And I think that moment has arrived." Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to my mother, Iris, from someone named Thomas Brennan. I didn't recognize the name. "Who is Thomas Brennan?" I asked. My grandmother sat down heavily, eyes distant. "He was Vivian's boyfriend in college. They were engaged, actually, planned to get married in the summer of 1995. She paused, her fingers tracing the handwriting on the letters. But then Vivian found out she was pregnant with Tessa, and Thomas panicked. He wasn't ready to be a father, so he broke off the engagement and disappeared. That's terrible, I said, feeling a pang of genuine empathy for Vivian. But what does that have to do with these letters to my mother? Because Thomas didn't completely disappear. He came back 6 months later, but not for Vivian. My grandmother looked at me, the weight of ancient truth in her eyes. He came back for Iris. He said he'd always had feelings for her, but he was with Vivian out of loyalty, out of shared history. But when the relationship ended, he finally had the courage to admit what he truly felt. My stomach clenched. My mother and Thomas had a brief affair, very brief. Your mother ended it after 2 months because she couldn't live with the guilt of being with her sister's ex-fiancé, even if Vivian had dismissed him first. Grandma Dorothy sighed. But Vivian found out, and she never forgave, never forgot. In her mind, Iris stole the only man she ever loved. But Vivian broke up with him. Logic doesn't matter when you're operating from a place of deep hurt, and Vivian was hurt, pregnant, alone, watching her younger sister have what she lost. Grandma Dorothy closed the box. That's why she raised Tessa the way she did. It wasn't just about making Tessa shine. It was about making sure Tessa always outshone you. It was proxy revenge. Iris stole Vivian's love, so Vivian would make sure her daughter stole Iris's happiness through you. The pieces finally clicked into place. The competition didn't start with my generation. It started 30 years ago, with sisters and a man who loved one but chose another. And Tessa and I were just pawns in a war that was never ours. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Because you need to understand that Vivian isn't a one-dimensional villain. She's a broken woman who never healed, who passed her pain onto her daughter, who turned ancient wounds into a modern weapon." Grandma Dorothy held my hands. And because when you expose Tessa, when the truth comes out, Vivian will retaliate. She will try to paint your mother as the original villain, and you need to be prepared for that. Does my mother know you're telling me? She knows, and she wants you to know the whole truth. Not a sanitized version, the complete truth, with all its complexity and pain. I sat there for a long moment, processing. Tessa wasn't just a narcissist raised by a toxic mother. She was a product of generational trauma, of lost love and slow revenge, of wounds that were never treated and then infected the next generation. This didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. "I'm still going to expose her," I said finally. "I'm still going to bring the truth to light. But now I understand that this is bigger than just me and Tessa. It's about breaking a cycle. It's about ensuring that this toxicity doesn't pass to another generation." My grandmother smiled, tears in her eyes. "You are stronger than any of us, Hazel, wiser, and you will break this cycle. I am sure of it." That night, I talked to my mother. For the first time, I really talked. About Thomas, about Vivian, about the guilt she had carried for 30 years, for the crime of falling in love with a man who was free, but emotionally tied to her sister. "I should have set boundaries with Vivian years ago," my mother said, tears streaming. "Should have protected you from her toxicity. But I felt guilty. As if I owed her something for having stolen Thomas, even though I stole nothing." "You didn't steal anything, Mom. Thomas made a choice, and Vivian chose never to get over it." I held her hands. "But now, we choose differently. We choose truth, we choose healing, and we choose to break the cycle." The day before the wedding, I received a message from an unknown number. My heart raced, an old fear that Vivian or Tessa had discovered the plan. But it wasn't from them. "My name is Thomas Brennan. Your grandmother gave me your number. I know my timing is terrible, but I need to talk to you before your wedding. It's about Vivian and Tessa. It's about things you need to know." I met Thomas at a quiet cafe in Ballard, away from places where family might see us. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, eyes that carried the weight of old regrets. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this is strange. A man you've never met asking to talk the eve of your wedding? My grandmother trusts you. That's enough." I sat down. "What do you need to tell me?" Thomas took a deep breath. Vivian contacted me 2 weeks ago, first time in almost 30 years. She said she needed a favor, that it was about protecting Tessa from making a mistake. He paused. She asked me to show up at your wedding, to cause a scene, to claim that Iris and I had an affair the entire time she was married to your father. My blood ran cold. That's a lie. I know. Your father was alive when Iris and I had our brief relationship, and it was only 2 months, decades ago. But Vivian wants to rewrite history. She wants to make Iris look like an adulteress, make you question your own family, make everyone at the wedding turn against you. He looked at me, raw regret in his eyes. And I almost agreed, because part of me still feels guilty for having abandoned Vivian when she was pregnant. But then I realized that agreeing would only perpetuate a cycle of pain. It would be using lies to cover up old truths. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what Vivian is planning. And because, he hesitated, because I saw Tessa. Vivian showed me her social media profile, and I saw what my cowardice created. I abandoned Vivian, and she turned that pain into poison that fed Tessa her whole life. I can't undo that, but I can prevent it from being perpetuated further. Are you coming to the wedding? No. And I want you to know that if Vivian tries anything, if she tries to claim I confirmed her lies, I have her emails asking for this favor. I have evidence that she's fabricating a story. He pushed an envelope across the table. That's everything. Every message, every request. Your truth, documented. I took the envelope with trembling fingers. More evidence, more proof of how far Vivian was willing to go to destroy her sister's happiness through me. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse, for choosing truth, for breaking the cycle. Good luck tomorrow, Thomas said, standing up. And Hazel, don't let the mistakes of my generation taint your future. You deserve happiness without shadows of old wars. That night, the eve of my wedding, I sat with Brian, Kennedy, my mother, and my grandmother. We spread all the evidence on Brian's dining table: photos, videos, audios, letters, emails, decades of documented toxicity ready to be exposed. Last chance to back out, Kennedy said. Once we do this, there's no going back. I looked at each person in the room. People who genuinely loved me, who didn't need to diminish me to feel great, who celebrated my happiness without envy or resentment. I'm not backing out. Tomorrow, I marry the man I love. And afterward, after vows are exchanged and photos are taken, after Vivian and Tessa think they've survived the day without managing to destroy me, I paused. Then we give them exactly what they always wanted. The stage, the spotlights, all the attention. And we let the light reveal who they truly are. Brian held my hand. Together, I agreed. My mother was crying, but they were tears of relief. 30 years, she whispered. 30 years carrying guilt, tolerating Vivian's toxicity, watching her poison Tessa against you. And finally, it's over. It's not over yet, Mom, but it will be tomorrow. That night, alone in my apartment, I lay awake staring at my wedding dress hanging in the closet. Delicate lace, pure white, a symbol of new beginnings. Tomorrow, I would wear that dress, walk down the aisle, say I do to Brian in front of everyone I loved. And afterward, after happiness was celebrated and love witnessed, I would do something I should have done years ago. I would say no. No to toxicity. No to manipulation. No to cycles of pain passed down as inheritance. The scent of lavender filled the room one last time. But now, it wasn't just about calm or caution. It was about courage. And tomorrow, I would have all the courage I needed. The wedding day dawned with an impossible blue sky over Seattle, the kind of day that feels like a gift from the universe. I woke at 6 a.m., heart racing but mind clear. Kennedy showed up at 7 a.m. with coffee and determination, camera already hanging from her neck. "Ready?" she asked. More than ever. The venue was stunning, Woodmark Hotel in Kirkland, overlooking Lake Washington. Lavender and white roses on every surface, exactly as planned. Natural light streaming in through huge windows, creating an ethereal atmosphere. Tessa arrived at 10 a.m., 3 hours before the ceremony, wearing, despite our conversations, an ivory dress that was basically white. She had completely ignored my choice of navy blue. Of course she had. "Surprise!" she sang, twirling. "I know you said navy blue, but this dress looked so perfect I couldn't resist. You don't mind, do you? It's your special day, after all." Her special day, but she needed to wear white. "It's beautiful, Tessa," I said calmly. Kennedy was filming everything, capturing every micro-expression of triumph on Tessa's face. Vivian arrived shortly after, wearing a deep purple that somehow managed to compete with the color palette we had chosen. She kissed my cheek, her smile not reaching her eyes. "What a beautiful day," she said. "I hope everything goes perfectly. No surprises." She was waiting for Thomas, waiting for him to show up and destroy everything. She didn't know he had warned me, that I had evidence of her plan. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparations. Makeup, hair, dress. My mother was by my side, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted my veil. She knew what was coming, and she was scared, but also relieved. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." My father? The man Vivian was about to defame with lies about a non-existent affair. The man who loved my mother faithfully until cancer took him 5 years ago. This was for him too. At 2 p.m., the music started. It was time. I walked down the aisle on my uncle's arm, my father's brother, looking at Brian waiting at the altar. He was stunning in a dark gray suit, his eyes gleaming with tears as he watched me approach. This moment was real, pure. Nothing Tessa or Vivian could taint it. Tessa was beside the altar, ivory dress catching the light, already posing for photographers. Even now, even at my wedding, she was performing. The ceremony was beautiful. We exchanged vows we had written, words about partnership, respect, love that doesn't need external validation. When Brian kissed me, sealing our marriage, I heard Tessa sigh dramatically. Even this, she couldn't let be about us. The reception began with dinner, speeches, toasts. Everything was going perfectly. Vivian was tense, looking at the door repeatedly, waiting for Thomas, who would never come. Tessa was in her element, circulating among tables, taking selfies, making sure everyone knew she was the maid of honor. Then the moment arrived. My grandmother Dorothy stood up, tapping a knife against a crystal glass. The sound echoed through the hall, silencing conversations. "May I have everyone's attention?" Her voice was firm, carrying the authority of a matriarch who would not be denied. Vivian paled. Tessa stopped in the middle of the hall, frozen. My grandmother motioned to Kennedy, who began projecting images onto the large screen we had installed for wedding photos. But it wasn't wedding photos that appeared. It was a video of Tessa trying to kiss Brian at the rehearsal. Audio of her and Vivian on the restaurant patio, planning to sabotage me. Screenshots of Tessa's messages to Brian, months of documented harassment. Photos of edited posts where I was blurred while Tessa shined. And then, emails from Vivian to Thomas, asking him to lie, to destroy my mother's reputation, to ruin my wedding with fabrications about an affair that never happened. The silence in the hall was absolute. 100 people watching decades of manipulation being exposed in real time. "This is—" Vivian stood up, her voice trembling. "This is a lie. Hazel is fabricating." "It's not fabrication." Thomas Brennan walked into the hall. He wasn't supposed to come, but apparently changed his mind. "I have the originals of every email you sent me, Vivian, every request to lie, every attempt to manipulate me into destroying Iris and Hazel in revenge for something that happened 30 years ago." "Thomas," Vivian whispered, her face draining of color.
You asked me to appear here and claim I had an affair with Iris during her marriage, that Hazel might not even be her father's child. All lies. Thomas looked at the hall.
The truth is, Iris and I had a brief relationship decades ago, long after Vivian and I broke up, long before Iris met her husband. 2 months, nothing more. But Vivian never got over it, and she spent 30 years punishing her sister and then her niece for the crime of me choosing Iris temporarily. Tessa was crying now, makeup streaking. Mom, what is he talking about? He's talking about how your mother used you as a weapon, my mother said, standing up. Her voice was trembling but firm. How she raised you believing that love was a competition, that worth was measured in envy, that you only mattered if you were outshining someone. Tessa, you were a victim as much as Hazel, a victim of a mother who turned her pain into poison and fed it to you from birth. No. Tessa shook her head. No, my mother loves me. She used you. I stood up, walking towards Tessa, and part of me pities you, because you never had a chance, never learned what real love looks like. Just performance, just transaction. Tessa looked at me, and for the first time, I saw through all the layers of makeup and masks. I saw the broken girl who was never loved unconditionally, who was taught that attention was love and competition was connection. Her voice broke. I didn't know. I thought that's how it worked. I know. I held her hands, even after everything, and that's why I'm doing this. Not for revenge, but for liberation, yours and mine. Because as long as we continue this cycle, neither of us will be free. Vivian was standing, trembling with rage. You ruined everything. No, Vivian. My mother walked to her sister. You ruined it. 30 years ago, when you chose revenge over healing. When you decided that making your daughter hate me was more important than letting her be happy. When you turned love into war and daughters into soldiers. You stole him. You stole Thomas. I didn't steal anything. My mother was crying now. He was free. You dismissed him. And I broke up with him after 2 months because I couldn't live with the guilt you made me feel. Guilt for something that wasn't a crime. And then I spent 30 years letting you punish me, letting you poison my daughter because I felt guilty for a crime I never committed. The hall was in absolute silence. 100 witnesses to a family disintegrating, to truths finally being told, to cycles finally being broken. Brian was by my side, his hand finding mine, an anchor, a reminder of why this mattered. Vivian, Tessa, I said, my voice firm, you have a choice now. You can continue this cycle. You can leave here and paint yourselves as victims, paint me as a villain. You can spread more lies, create more drama, perpetuate more pain. Or, I paused, or you can choose healing, real therapy, real work on understanding why love became competition and family became a battlefield. What if we choose healing? Tessa asked, her voice small. Then, perhaps, someday, we can rebuild, not as we were, that was broken from the start, but as something new, something healthy, something based on real respect, not performance. Tessa looked at her mother, waiting for direction as she always did. But Vivian was broken, her mask finally shattered, with no script to follow. I don't know how, Tessa whispered. I don't know how to be different. No one does at first, my grandmother said gently, but you learn, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Vivian left. She simply turned and walked out, unable to face the truth, unable to admit decades of toxicity. Some in the family followed her, those who preferred the comfort of family lies to the discomfort of truth. But many stayed, and Tessa stayed. I'm sorry, she said, looking at me, for everything. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want to try to be different. Then try, I said simply. Not for me, for you. The reception continued, but differently now. Quieter, more real. People talking in small groups, processing, some crying, some hugging. Kennedy found me near the window, looking at the lake bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. You did it, she said. You really did. We did, I corrected. Couldn't have done it without you. How do you feel? I thought about it. Exhausted, relieved, sad, hopeful. That's healing, Kennedy said. It's not simple, it's not clean, but it's real. Brian found me minutes later, pulling me into a dance, even without music. Just the two of us, swaying gently, looking to a future that was finally ours, free from the shadows of old wars. Do you regret it? He asked. Exposing the truth? Never. Hurting people in the process? Always. I looked at him. But sometimes surgery hurts, and sometimes the only way to heal an infected wound is to open it up, clean it, and let the air in. You're the bravest woman I know. Not brave, just tired of living a lie. When the reception ended, when the last guests left, I sat with my mother and grandmother on the balcony overlooking the lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky in impossible oranges and pinks. Thank you, my mother said, for doing what I didn't have the courage to do for 30 years. You had courage, Mom. It just manifested differently. You raised me with real love, not performance. Taught me that worth doesn't come from external attention. And that gave me the foundation to do this. My grandmother held our hands. 3 generations of Montgomery women. And finally, we broke the cycle. It wasn't a perfect happy ending. Vivian had left, refusing to face the truth. Half the family was confused, some angry, some relieved. Tessa was somewhere beginning a long journey of unlearning toxicity and learning health. But it was a beginning, and beginnings, however imperfect, were all we needed. 3 months later, I received a letter from Tessa. She was in intensive therapy, working through decades of conditioning. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She knew she didn't deserve it yet. She just shared her progress, small steps, days where she chose authenticity over performance, moments where she celebrated someone's success without feeling threatened. I don't know if I'll ever be a person you can call your cousin again, she wrote, but I'm trying to be a person I can call human, and that's a start. I replied, not with promises of reconciliation, but with encouragement, because healing wasn't about me forgiving her. It was about her forgiving herself, and that would take time. Vivian never contacted me. I heard through family members that she had moved to Arizona, cutting contact with most of the family. Part of me felt sadness for that. A woman so consumed by an old wound that she preferred isolation to healing. But it wasn't my responsibility to save her. Some people don't want to be saved. They want to be right. Brian and I moved into a small house in Ballard, with a garden where I planted lavender. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of transformation. Lavender that survives harsh winters and blooms stronger. Kennedy became my true best friend, not out of family obligation or shared history, but by choice. Because she saw me at my worst and stayed. Because she fought for me when I was learning to fight for myself. My mother finally went to therapy, working through 30 years of undeserved guilt. She and Vivian didn't reconcile. Some bridges burn so completely that reconstruction isn't possible. But she found peace. And that was enough. A year after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant, a girl. When I held the positive test, the first thing I thought was, she will grow up differently. She will grow up knowing that love isn't a competition, that family is a choice, not an obligation, that worth comes from within, not from external spotlights. She will grow up free. We named her Dorothy Iris, in honor of the women who broke cycles, who chose truth over comfort, who taught me that courage sometimes feels uncomfortable but always feels right. On the night we brought Dorothy home from the hospital, I sat in the rocking chair in her room, smelling lavender from the diffuser, holding this little miracle that represented a future free from the shadows of the past. Brian joined me, his arm around my shoulders, both watching our daughter sleep. "Do you think she'll ever understand?" he asked. "Why we did what we did? Why we exposed everything?" "I think she'll grow up in a family where truth is valued, where boundaries are respected, where love doesn't come with conditions or performances. I looked at him, and that will be answer enough. There wasn't a perfect, cinematic happy ending. Life doesn't work that way. Some wounds heal, some leave scars. Some people choose growth, others choose bitterness. But I chose freedom. I chose truth. I chose to break a cycle that could have poisoned my daughter the same way it poisoned Tessa. And that choice, however painful at the moment, was the best thing I ever did. Because in the end, it wasn't about Tessa wanting the spotlight. It was about me finally understanding that I didn't need the spotlight to have worth. That my life, quiet and authentic, was more valuable than any performance. Tessa wanted the stage at any cost, so I gave it to her, but not in the way she expected. I gave her a stage where truth was illuminated, where masks were removed, where performance ended and real humanity began. And when the lights went out on that stage, when the spotlights finally ceased, she was left alone with herself for the first time. No audience, no external validation, just her and the truth of who she had become. Some say I was cruel, that exposing family publicly was beyond limits, but I disagree. Cruelty is allowing toxicity to continue. It's letting cycles of pain pass to the next generation. It's choosing false peace over uncomfortable truth. I chose differently. And my daughter, sleeping peacefully in my arms, will grow up in a world where authenticity is celebrated, where boundaries are respected, where love is given freely, not conditionally. She will grow up free from the spotlights that burned her cousin, and that, more than anything else, makes it all worthwhile. This story shows us that sometimes the most loving act is to say no. No to toxicity, no to performance, no to cycles of pain disguised as family tradition. That family isn't about blood or shared history. It's about who chooses to stay when truth is revealed, when masks fall, when you finally set healthy boundaries. Healing is not linear. There are days when you question if you did the right thing, days where the pain of breaking cycles feels worse than the pain of continuing in them. But every step, however small, is a victory. Every choice of authenticity over performance is a quiet revolution. And sometimes we discover that we don't need spotlights to shine, that our light, small and constant, illuminates the path better than any performance could. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Let us know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. And always remember, you are stronger than you think, especially when you choose truth over comfort. And you, what do you value more, performance that impresses or authenticity that liberates?